Today we're going to be having a discussion with Eryn Donnalley. And thank you so much for being here, Eryn.
Thanks for having me, Kelsey. Good to be here.
Can you tell me a little bit about what brings you to be interested in the subject of deconstruction and everything around that?
Sure. So most of my story relates to mental health and finding mental health. And I grew up in the church. We weren't fanatical, it wasn't, really hardcore stuff, but I had sort of a core base of that belief system. And I carried it with me into my teens and 20s. But all through that time, I was struggling with mental health issues. And eventually at age 36, I had sort of this like aha moment that I was really not well. And I had to take some drastic steps in a different direction. And so I was going through a divorce. I was leaving the company my husband and I had, and I put all my stuff in storage and I took a one-way flight to India. And I had hoped to be gone for a year just to figure myself out. And in the end, I was gone for over 2 years. And I had not seen it at that time as a spiritual journey. Ironically enough, I was not interested in any of the Eastern religions necessarily, but I was still drawn to go there. And so, in fact, in the beginning, I was still quite firmly kind of held in the Christian side. And then through some synchronicities and some chance encounters, I started becoming open to these other philosophies, and I started exploring my own mental health in really different ways. And I guess the result of all that was better mental health for myself, and that's a sustained place. That was 7 years ago now, nearly, when I left. And so, yeah, it challenged me to redefine faith.
Wow. Yeah. What did you learn about mental health in that time that changed your relationship with it?
Yeah. Well, one of the big things was how to deal with my own mind. Like, I did not have an awareness that I really had more ability to take control of my mental health. I had mental health issues in my family, my mother and my father, and some of my grandparents, and I had dealt with it for most of my life. I'd been in kind of standard therapy. I'd been on some of the pharmaceuticals, and I really felt defeated in that. And I felt, this is just who I am. And I bought into this whole system that, oh, well, if like Prozac isn't working, and if, therapy isn't working, then what am I to do? I'm genetically predisposed, so this is just who I am. And so that in itself was a big change in my own belief system, where I came to find, like, there are other tools and methods and a way to change my own perception of how to challenge myself in different ways and start to understand the nature of the mind. And so that in itself was, life-changing, honestly.
Yeah. And how is that different from what was taught to you growing up, specifically in the faith that you grew up with?
Well, I guess it seems to me, and I feel like I should just, bracket this by saying, this is my experience, and I'm not sure how other people will relate to this, but it didn't feel like mental health was really addressed, or transformation. And again, I have limited experience, but I also don't want to devalue my own receiving of the messages. And so as I was going through this deconstruction, it started making me really think about, okay, where did I disempower myself? And because it came to be in my awareness, okay, I have more power over this than I realized. So what is it that I can do? Where have I gone wrong in my own mind, kind of a thing? And one of the things that occurred to me was how prayer actually came to disempower me. And what I mean by that is, I think maybe, and you can share some from what your experience is too, we're told to turn our problems over to God and trust God that this is going to be handled for us, or, we'll find some answers. And in the end, like what I feel that kind of taught me, or somehow it sort of crystallized in me, that there is something out there that is going to fix me in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can see, if someone is turning to prayer and to guidance, saying, I really need to support my family and I need a job. And they're probably going to take some very tangible steps on their own to fill out some job applications and do a Google search, right? Mm-hmm. But if we're talking about mental health and we're kind of begging for help so that I can be content and peaceful within my own mind, that's a very like elusive sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are not very clear steps, I don't think. And so for me, it felt like that became a way of actually bypassing personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And couple that with the indoctrination side of like, this is the path, the answers are here, which limits one's ability to kind of open to other opportunities for health and healing.
Right. So there's that spiritual bypass,
Mm-hmm.
trusting God, healing emphasis sometimes. And so when that doesn't change anything, you can walk away with this sense that I'm somehow, I'm not spiritual enough, or
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it right, or I'm not in a right relationship with God, or
right.
is that the
maybe,
type of
maybe,
bypass?
or I'm just broken and I'm just going to wait because God's the only one who has the answers.
Yeah.
And maybe this is what I'm just meant to experience right now. So I'm going to wait and I'm going to be faithful and I'm going to pray every night.
And the community can feed into that. Can't they?
Yes.
That's often elevated as behavior that is seen as full of faith, or an example to everyone of carrying your cross.
Yeah. And so do you see that with your clients as well?
Yeah. It definitely does come up, where even for some people being in therapy, they might be doing it, not telling certain people, like it's normal not to tell everyone that you're in therapy. If like it's yours to share or not share. But I mean, some people feel that if certain people knew that they were in therapy, they would see it as bystepping God, or not allowing God to do his work in them, or something like that. And so I've definitely had to hash out some of those dynamics with clients, as well as psychology tools, I guess, that are scientifically proven to help relieve mental health, or help manage anxiety or depression or different things like that. And in some people, the community that they grew up in has told them that to do that is to not submit to God's authority, or to turn to science instead of God, or this and that. And so I can totally see what you're saying with.
I mean, and I understand the intention is good.
Oh yeah.
The intention, and so I don't want to reduce hope or faith in a practice that is really valuable and can be really valuable. But I just think it's almost like part of the human maybe conditioning that we want something out there to fix us. And so it's sort of like a convenient coupling of belief systems where we want someone else to fix us because we don't want to do the work ourselves. And in the end, that really was the takeaway for myself, was like, okay, Eryn, you got to get in there and figure your own mind out. Like, no one else is going to do it for you. This is the most important project you could ever do in your life, because if I don't heal myself, then like I probably, it was not a good time for me.
So what did that look like practically to you to get in there and do it yourself?
Yeah, well, I had exposure to Buddhist lectures and silent retreats very early on in my trip. And I have to say that was hands down kind of the starting gate for me. And I just thought it was really fascinating the way they, you know, and I'm not Buddhist. I've never followed that path, you know, specifically. But I just felt they present it in a way that basically tells you suffering comes from our own mind. And so we have to understand the nature of the mind so that we can start to dissolve the perceptions that create our own suffering. And so it's a very personal, responsible path, you know, to challenge yourself and to look at yourself. But it's also big on forgiveness and compassion and, you know, releasing the guilt and the shame, which of course, you know, is important on the path of healing.
Yeah.
So that was a part of it. I mean, meditation was huge for me. Silent retreats, I feel, are kind of the most powerful tool that I ran across. There's something, one friend told me, he said, how lucky we are to have found the simplest, purest path, which is silence. And when he said it like that, I was like, wow, that's really powerful, because it's not about teachings. It's not about anybody standing up there telling you who you should be or how you should think. It's just like coming clean within yourself and sort of dissolving your own impurities, if you will, and then coming through the other side to be like a healthier, like, I just wanted to be a better person. I couldn't stand who I was anymore, and I didn't like who I was, internally, externally. And so I just want to be a better person, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it started for me. And then I was gone for 2 years, and I explored all sorts of different things, and then I wrote a book about that. And
I was going to ask you about the book. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, so I wrote a book. It's called Facing Freedom. And it sort of encompasses the 28 months that I was gone and different people or experiences or philosophies that had an impact on me. So it's kind of like hardcore healing around the world sort of thing. And I learned something everywhere I went. I mean, I was just exploring different paths and seeing what I could take from them. And, you know, and I know that would probably be frowned upon in a lot of circles, you know, like, oh, you're not committing to one path. You're, you know, dipping your toe in, if you will. But honestly, I feel intention had a big role in that, because I traveled with the intention to like find a better version of myself. It was not like, oh, I want to take a cool trip, you know. It was like a desperate quest. And so I feel I was really supported in that from a higher power, and that I was led to certain people, places, and things, you know. And then afterwards I returned to America, and it was a very sort of bizarre return. I know you probably got experience with this too, because you've been overseas quite a bit in Jordan. And, you know, when you come back to your home country, things are very different, or they're the same and you're different. Or both, right? Yeah. And so there was like some time of integration for me. And then I realized, wow, I really want formal education in kind of what I experienced as well, because I wanted like a framework to help me make sense of kind of all the transformation that I had experienced while traveling. And so that's how I ended up, I'm in my 3rd year right now of a master's degree in consciousness studies, spirituality, and transpersonal psychology.
Wow.
So it's sort of like, I feel like it's rounding me off, and I'm coming together to,
It sounds like an interesting arc in that you kind of had these desires. You felt like you needed to make some really big life changes. Then you travel, go overseas, have all of these experiences and insightful interactions, and did all of this inner work. You wrote a book about it. And now you're studying, and kind of, it sounds kind of like it's kind of like from the inside, kind of now panning out.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Very much like a mandala. Like I draw mandalas, and that's sort of like from the center working outward. Yeah, and it is. It's very much like the hero's journey too. You know, there's a call. You go out and you deal with like the problems and your own inner dragons, and then you return home and then you help others. And that's kind of what I've transitioned to. I'm working now with, I'm a transformational guide and coach. And so I'm working with people in religious deconstruction that are going through that, because that's a very delicate and personal journey, and people are on all different places where they're coming out of that, and they've had different experiences or different traumas even. And so, you know, I mean, I know, you know, because you work with clients like that, it's a very delicate sort of subject to traverse, because belief systems are so deeply embedded, you know?
Yeah. Wow. So between studying and being a coach, how's that going for you so far?
Well, it's good. I'm trying to take it slowly, because I want to make sure I'm really able to, you know, work with people in a way that's authentic to me and helpful to them. And but so far it's going really well. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm getting good feedback from people, which is always nice, because I mean, I consider myself very much the wounded healer. You know, we have our own issues, we deal with them, we find our way through them, and then we turn it around to a service mind and start to help others.
Right.
And so I feel very much called to that, to work with people. I'm trying to focus on certain areas that I have personally dealt with. And my 4 main areas are depression, religious deconstruction, fatherless daughters, people who have had that as part of their path, and then body dysmorphia and like emotional eating and those things. And those are all things that were big parts of my path that I've overcome. And so, yeah. And so it was really amazing that we met, and that you're doing the religious deconstruction work as well. And
yeah, it's really neat when you intersect with other people doing similar work along the way, and then being able to talk about what brought us to do that work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like what you said about turning it around, like doing your own work and then helping others do the same work. And something that I found as well is, as you help others, you have to like kind of circle back to your own work at certain times, because you realize, oh, okay, you know, for where I was at before, I worked through this, but now intersecting or interacting with other stories, you realize, okay, there's these other parts of my stories that I haven't worked through. Yeah. And it's such a great journey towards growth and towards wholeness. So
yeah, I kind of view it as this quest for wholeness. And I think that's what's important, and that's how we have, you know, a life that's in alignment, where our, you know, mind, body, and spirit are sort of in harmony. And I think that's what's important. So wherever people find that, I think it's go there, do it, you know. And for me, this was my path, and you know, I'm really, really grateful that I had exposure to these other things that I never would have had I not left America. You know, but yeah, I think it is interesting when you start turning around and helping people, you know, you start to, like you said, you find these, it's like your own story is being unearthed in all these different layers. And so you see things differently, and then a client will share something, and it kind of validates something that you already learned, and you're like, oh yes, this is important. Right. You know, and so I mean, I sort of see myself as a lifelong student, you know, but if I can help other people, it's like we're just on different parts of the path, you know. It's just we're just all working down the path. So
right.
Yeah.
How will your education intersect with your work? What are you anticipating with that?
Well, that's a good question, because it is a transpersonal psychology degree, but it's not a clinical degree. So I'm not really on the path to become a licensed psychotherapist or anything. So, and I also don't want to be limited by the structures of that. And so I think it feels good to stay in the guide or coaching side. But it just feels like it gives me, you know, like some structure to, you know, because when I had all these experiences personally, they still felt very like, oh, maybe it's just me, or maybe this, you know, But it's like, no, there's research around this, and there's work being done, to validate some of these things that are what would be considered alternative, healing modalities. And so that built confidence in me, so that it wasn't just my experience. Now it's like, these are real things that are working for people. And so I think that in itself has given me, just a different level of understanding so that I can work with people. And then also my plan is to write more books. And as I am still dissecting all of these parts of my own past mental health issues, I'm able to see them now in a different light with my experience and education. And so it's bringing me, I think, to a new awareness where hopefully I can write, like the first book was very much a memoir and very much, this is my experience, but it is also a workbook so people can sort of go into their own story. I felt that was really important. Yeah, it's not just a travel, it's about letting them dig into their own story. But I think future books are definitely going to be more related to, I'm working on one now called 7 Years in the Shadow, which is about my last 7 years, where I've basically been kind of dissecting depression. And so, we'll see how that goes. And, but that feels important to me to kind of keep moving in that direction. So,
That's great.
I think in the end, I'll be part teacher, part guide, part writer, but all with the overarching theme of transformation.
Awesome.
And probably in a spiritual context. I mean, I'm still consider myself a spiritual person, and, I do believe in something beyond us here. And, I think it was the French philosopher Chardin who said, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And like, I very much relate to that. And so that still feels part of my journey, just, yeah.
Awesome. What advice what advice can you give to people who are earlier in their journey than you?
I think be open-minded and try, and if you're curious about something, go check it out. If someone that you know or that you respect has walked a different path than you, or has found mental health in a place that you would maybe before dismiss, or like, oh, I'm not sure about that, check it out. I think one of the best things I found was, at the end of the day, I was too scared to look at other options because I didn't have the strength within myself. Like, I felt like I was being coerced or manipulated, or I was being, turning my back on God or something. And I think God wants us to be healthy. And if we find it in a different place than Christianity, well, I think that's maybe part of the path too. Or it can be, not for everyone. So I think maybe the advice is just to try and open your mind and know that you can leave whatever you try. You can go check it out. And if it makes sense to you, if it sits well with your heart, and I knew when I sat down in some of these lectures, it was like, oh yes, this makes sense to me. This is like really feeling right to me. And so I was able to drop my guard and not worry that, like you have control. I think that's the key too, is to recognize,
autonomy.
Yeah. And that in itself takes a certain level of independence to recognize, okay, I can go try this. And then if I like it, great. If I don't, then I can step away. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kelsey. Is there anything you want to share, or anything feeling like coming up for you?
It's a great question.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of things.
Yeah. No, I really appreciated this conversation.
Okay.
I really like the advice that you just gave about owning your independence, because in some faith forms, I think that we're kind of expected to just kind of fall in line, and to own your independence is to question the authority of the structure, or the authority of the Bible or the Holy Book, but being encouraged to go out and find what you're looking for, and it might not be where you are, and it's also totally okay to to try something and think you might like it, and then to realize that you don't, or to realize that it doesn't quite vibe with you, and there's probably something else somewhere else. And I think that's advice I could have really used when I was younger.
Oh, me too. It took a lot of, Well, thanks for doing the work you're doing too. I know you're helping a lot of people with these, religious deconstruction areas. And I think people really do need support, because it is a very uncomfortable thing to step away.
It is. From
your own faith and your belief systems, because it can also mean community and family and all those things. And so it can feel like a very lonely path.
Yeah. A ripple effect.
Yeah.
Well,
all right. Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey.
No problem. Thanks for being here.
See you.